This episode brought to you by Anchor FM, the easiest way to make a podcast. Anchor gives you everything you need for free, which you can use right from your phone or computer to make a podcast. Creation tools allow you to record and edit your podcast out so it sounds great. They'll even distribute the podcast for you so it can be heard everywhere. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can even make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Download the Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started. Anchor, the best way to make your podcast. Welcome into Fundraise Now. The purpose of this show is to introduce you to new ideas so you can raise money for issues and causes you care about. We talked to Carroll Simon, former director of the Buffalo Museum of Science and restaurant entrepreneur. Under her leadership, the museum undertook a new strategic plan and focused on a culture that valued an immersive experience. She also talks about board development and building relationships with key stakeholders. If you're a small nonprofit, you should listen to this. If you're a big nonprofit, you should listen to this. Or if you just love museums. We start off asking Carroll about exhibit design. Full disclosure, I know Carroll very well. She's my aunt.
Well, first of all, the reason that the Science Museum was interested in me as an exhibit designer was that at that time, which we're talking now 1985, exhibit design was really changing from what I sort of call pheasant under glass, which is basically the, museums putting things behind glass and sort of dictating, this is what we know about these things and now you should know that too, which is very traditional museum design to a more experiential, immersive kind of exhibit design where people the intention was that they would experience certain things and then come to own the knowledge through their own exploration. And because that is similar to what happens in the theater, they thought that my design principles would transfer well to that. So that is sort of why they were interested in me, and I guess why I was interested in working there. So that's sort of part of the answer to your question. The other, how did I define myself as a leader there? Well, I think if you were to talk to people who worked with me during many of those years, they would tell you that I always used to ask the question at meetings, which was, why bother? In other words, we're going to set off here to do a lot of work. We're going to spend a lot of resources, time, money, space, equipment, tools, materials to create something together. And why should we bother doing that? If you peel away all the layers of the onion, what is this really all about? And why should we be spending our resources on this instead of on something else? And so I would, I think they would. That was sort of part one. It was always sort of the macro view. Let's really, what is the fire in our belly? What's the change we wish to create, on this project? So that was one way in which I think I was identified, was that I really didn't force, I think I inspired, hopefully, my team to really think about, the answer to that question. And of course then use that as the filter through which all decisions are made. All decisions then have to align with that big idea. And the second thing that I think I was identified with as a leader was that, the devil is in the details. Um, every single, every single decision counts. And, no matter how small or how large it is. And in order for people to have a meaningful experience, all those details matter. So I think that's, and then of course, there's all of the, the financial, the leadership around, the economics of the project. So I would say that I was kind of, I think, sort of blessed with a left brain, right brain, kind of way of approaching things. Big picture, small picture, and also all the data-driven stuff that goes behind all of that.
You were part of the organization when they developed a strategic plan that really looked at probably the sustainability and long-term projection. And you want to talk about tough questions. And we've talked about this a little bit, but I found the story fascinating because it was so healthy for the organization to kind of go through it. And you were instrumental in doing it and helping it grow and progress. And so just talk to me about how did that kind of come up and how that process went at the organization where you had to really like balance every kind of department and all the different meet goals that people wanted within an organization, within a meeting.
Yeah, those are both big questions with long answers.
Yeah.
So the first question is, why did the board of managers of the Science Museum, along with the CEO, think that change was critical? I mean, and the answer to that is really twofold. There was money that drying up from county, city, state sources. The museums nationally were on a long arc of changing their economic models from being, really driven by unearned income to really needing to be driven by earned income. And that was, a really hard pill for museums to swallow. Because that's not how it had been from the inception of museums up until really probably around the early 80s. And we were in the same boat as everyone else. We had to figure out how to sustain ourselves, and not to the exclusion of grants and government funding and so on, but the balance of that had really tipped. And so that was just in order to be able to continue to be able to pursue our mission, we had to be financially able to do that. Secondly, museums, much like libraries, due to technological advances, were on the verge of becoming obsolete. When there was so much information that you could get without going to the place. You didn't have to go, you don't have to go to a library to get a book and read a book. You don't even have to really go to a museum to see, artifacts and, specimens. Although those of us who are museum geeks would argue that there's no comparison, to, seeing even a really highly digitized, fabulous photo of a mummy to standing in front of a mummy with only, an 1/8-inch piece of glass between you and it. So, we had
an experiential. It's an experiential kind of learning environment,
right? our attendance was down, our membership was down, everything was down. And so we had to, we had to change or die. And probably a very, very slow, because museums don't die quickly. They die very slowly. And so, we had to do that. And so then we put together, a team of people, within the museum and also some really extraordinary, outside museum, professionals who came in and worked with us throughout the strategic plan process, which was probably it was 10 months or so long. And, the question, the bottom line question was, well, first of all, we really wrestled with the question of, why does this institution exist? And which is different than what the mission statement is. It was, that was a very interesting process and very problematic for a lot of people sitting around the table because they didn't want their world to change. But, we eventually, after a lot of navel gazing and hair pulling, came up with the phrase that the Buffalo Museum of Science exists in order to create a better world by helping all people to explore and understand it. And every single word of that matters. There's no accident to any single one of those words. It took a long time to get to it, but it's very simple. So once we came to that really was, that was a major breakthrough so all of a sudden we weren't there to be in the business of original scientific research. That wasn't what we were there to do. That could be a part of it. So it's a matter, we weren't there to educate, although that was a part of it. It's a bigger idea. We were there to create a better world by helping all people to explore and understand it. So it infers a sort of a hierarchy of purpose, so that some of our scientists who thought we were there, who thought that we were there to create new knowledge in the scientific field, and some of those people actually thought that everything else, like the revenue from exhibits and gift shop and admissions and so forth, were there to support the research. Well, that's once you come to agree to that, then that's no longer true. So that reframed everything for us, and then the other big question was, all right, if that's what we're there to do, let's take an inventory of what we have. What are our assets? We had this building that was an observatory. We had scientists doing original research. And probably most of all, what we had was this collection of this natural history and anthropological collection. That was what I would call and so then what was the nature of the collection? If you look at a place like, I'm from Buffalo, so you look at a place like the Albright Knox, which is a world-class museum with a world-class collection. They have what I would call a narrow and deep collection. The Buffalo Museum of Science is a regional museum. It had a broad and shallow collection. Doesn't make it bad. It makes it different. It made us a very good regional museum. So we did, then the question was, how do we leverage, all of these amazing assets that we have that really people don't recognize as assets? I mean, the museum hadn't done a very good job in decades really letting people know about all these special things about it. So it was, how do we how do we leverage these assets in order so that in such a way that they are meaningful for our community. And that was really different because we weren't trying. It was like, no, we're not trying to be. We may become a world-class museum on our adventure, but our purpose is to be good for our community. It was to be good for Western New York. It was to be great for Western New York. And if on the way to doing that, we became something. In other words, we weren't set out to be a tourist attraction. We weren't setting out to be. We were a regional museum trying to be the best we could be, as meaningful as we could be for our community. So, that's, and then all of our decisions, dropped out of the answers. We came to those really two big questions. Why do we exist? And how do we leverage our assets, in such a way as to basically, create a scientifically literate community?
You're looking at assets and you're trying to see how you can, educate Western New York, but you've got to, it's not just, you can't just have it, right? You've got to sell it.
Yeah. Well, I think of marketing like with a capital M. I mean, I think a lot of people think marketing is advertising and, marketing or marketing is communication, and it is those things, but it's really the gestalt of product and place and how it's really everything. I mean, marketing is really everything. And, you can't really inspire other people to love you. I hate to sound trite, but if you don't love yourself, and you have to, and I think that when you do love yourself, institutionally or organizationally speaking, other people will love you. I think it comes across. There's a confidence, there's an energy, that I don't think you even need to speak of. I think it's just self.
So it wasn't, you weren't going for like a cash grab. It was something that you wanted to build, and so both these things are something that you wanted to build and sustain.
Right. No, I mean, we were at the Science Museum, we were drilled sort of in the philosophy and thinking of, Jim Collins and Jerry Porras from the Built to Last, and Good to Great books, who, among many other things that they discovered in their research, was that companies who defined their reasons for being in terms of profit didn't really endure. It's companies who define themselves first and foremost by the change they wish to make, knowing that they have to be, you have to make, net revenue in order to continue to pursue that. But again, it's a matter of which comes first, and what comes first is the change you wish to create, and then you do that, smartly, so that you do in effect make net revenue. So yeah, I mean, like, how much money is enough money? We needed, we needed to make a profit.
What advice would you give to those who are responsible for managing the board of trustees?
Well, I think that first of all, the relationship between the executive director and the board president really has to be a good one. There has to be, an ability to have candor and differences of opinion and agreeing to disagree and, compromise on both sides. I think that's really important. And when I was the when I was the interim director, I really had a very special relationship with our board of directors, and we were very unlikely bedfellows on any other on any other subject, probably politically, but we both really loved the Science Museum. And he had, he had spent some really formative years at the Science Museum, and it was in his blood and in his heart. He talked about, the first girl he ever kissed was up behind the observatory on the roof of the Science Museum. I mean, but, and then he went on to become one of the most successful executives in the city of Buffalo. And he stayed with the Science Museum all those years. I mean, he was, so I think, and the Science Museum was also, I think, lucky because there were many other people like that who had long personal histories with the institution and who really, really loved it, including the man who was the board representative on the strategic planning process was another one of those people. And so my relationship with him was very good, and in fact is very good today. We are, I would call him a friend. And I think that you have to, at least I felt, like I had to earn the respect of the board. I had to, these were people who were accomplished people. They were successful people because of the knowledge, and skill, and discipline that they had in most cases, if not all, to get ahead. And I felt that I had to demonstrate that I was that I could do that too. I couldn't just fudge my way around. I couldn't, I had to be highly disciplined and, work really, really hard. And also you have to have, you have to have the people smarts. You have to understand each of those board members as best you can about, what makes them tick, and what do you think what do you think about what you're about ready to do is going to not sit well with them, and talk to them about that before you do it. Like have those one-on-one conversations if you can ahead of time and say, look, I know you feel this way about this. We'll talk this, but I want to, so that you're getting as many of the disagreements, you're doing as much of the sort of politicking in the best sense of the word, not around the table with everybody else. You're getting those discussions.
You're getting a sense of what's going on before the board meeting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not a surprise.
Yeah, it's not a surprise, and you've listened to that person, and you've even made compromises based on that, so that when you go to the table, those compromises are now what you're discussing instead of, and then that person can see that you've bent, and now maybe they should bend. It's really, it's really about compromises, and it's really, it's people skills. It's emotional intelligence. It's the emotional intelligence aspect of, being a leader that is, is as important as anything else about being a leader is understanding each, not just understanding people individually,
Mm-hmm.
and don't ever put them in a bad position publicly, ever.
Yeah.
Don't ever do that. Get that out of the way behind the scenes.
How often do you like to communicate with your superior?
Well, with my team, my professional team, I wanted to communicate almost daily. With the CFO and director of development and marketing people and the director of education and those people. Daily we were in communication. With the board, I did not. These are busy people. So I was very economical about that. I chose those times wisely and was prepared. I made them count. What I wanted to do was to get, their direction, and then be given the freedom to do it, and then report back as necessary. I really loved preparing for board meetings. I really did. I'm very proud. I have a whole notebook still of all the presentations I made to the board when I was interim director. I loved preparing those because not only was, the initiative for that was to communicate with them, but what it forced me to do was to reflect back and to see, did everything we were doing line up with what we said we were going to do, and is everybody marching to the same drummer? So it was a really good test for me to see if we were really doing what we were supposed to be doing.
That was Carroll Simon, former director of the Buffalo Museum of Science and successful restaurant entrepreneur. Some of the most important things I'm taking away from her are: define your reason for being. Why does your institution exist? You should be able to answer that. You need to have that statement at the ready and have everyone from HR to faculty to senior staff and leadership memorize it. It's so vital to have them buy in. The second interesting thing I thought she said was, you can't inspire others to love you unless you love yourself. It comes across, there's a confidence, and it's felt and understood. We as charities always exist by the change we wish to make in the world. Be the change you wish to see in the world. I think that's Gandhi. If you like some of the content today, feel free to give us a little like, a little subscribe, a little follow. I want you to fundraise now so you can execute on your organization's mission.